the bottom, the stops, the levels where he wants to go, and if you're the last one to get out, could be quite frustrating, quite a long ride, and it's actually quite impressive. I mean, in China, people get now, I mean, they have like, when they come too late to work for the third time, they get fired. So you can imagine what's happening, in big, tall skyscrapers. At 9 o'clock in the morning at the lobby, people want to start running up because they want to get too late. And this is due to, these conditions. So it's a really serious problem as well. And then with Schindler, they are actually the first ones who implemented this idea of a destination control system. So before you get into the cabin, you tell the system where you want to go, and the elevator kind of groups you according to your destination. So everybody gets in. That's of course, very idealistic, but everybody's super happy because it's a kind of it's highly sophisticated algorithms that calculate the shortest ways for everybody. And that's an interesting paradox, because you think if you ask everybody in the room, it's like, okay, where do you want to go? If somebody wants to, it get chaos. But through these technologies, and these algorithms, we actually can, increase the system intelligence. We can increase the system efficiency as well. And of course, most importantly, the experience for the user. So this concept on the right, this idea of this destination control, we want to take from a vertical stack in skyscrapers and take this to an organization horizontally laid out as neighborhoods. So think of your destination in a level now as a neighborhood in a city. And then group people accordingly to the same destination they have, and through in the optimum condition in the above ground and underground routes, transfer routes, bring them to their common neighborhood, and then distribute them for the last local mile. So, as I said, we want to activate also, three-dimensionally the spaces that are there already. And we did this example for Berlin, subway tunnels we have. And if you think about tunnels, I mean, this is like the most expensive infrastructure you could think of. And it's most of the time it's empty. Nothing happens there. People, sometimes there's a subway coming through, but most of the time nothing happens there. And Elon Musk came up with this. It's called the Boring Company. Boring. But no, he actually, I think he released this video 2 weeks ago, saying we should have more tunnels and bring cars down, into these tunnels and have multiple levels. I think we have the same gridlock that we experiencing today on one level. We just have the same thing, on the other level. So I'm not so sure about this idea that you put a Tesla down there. I think we have to reinvent this thing that goes down there, basically. And that was what we tried to do with the designers from Audi. And we looked at the functional architecture of a car. Basically, you have the powertrain in the front, you have the cabin for most of the time 4 people, and then you have the door. The designers who worked with us, they say door is such a painful moment because they designed this beautiful object and then somebody cuts in the door, basically. So it's a really painful moment for them. I think the door should be an integral part of the system. It should actually be, the entire vehicle should be a door, basically. So what we said, let's first of all shrink this vehicle down to 1-seater, and say the whole perimeter becomes a door now, and then have this powertrain that's a decoupled peripheral powertrain, and so loosely bring them together. And so this is the kind of smallest unit of this kind of collective mobility concept. It's called flywheel, basically. As I said, this door is actually the most important part, because now it can couple with other units. So from a 1-seater, it could grow into a 2-seater and so on, in both sides. And the interior is now, yeah, there it is. So you have the most of the space you have now in front of you instead of behind of yourself. And then it can also turn into a logistic mode for transporting goods, because it of course works autonomously. You don't have to drive it. And because this is kind of loosely coupled, you actually won't experience going up and down so much anymore. It's like a kind of gravity responsive interior, basically. And this is, as a one-seater, it basically could become a personal assistant to an aging society right now. And as a two-seater, we could say it turns into a dating app, maybe Tinder on the go or something. Or as a multiple-seater, it could become a guitar concert, maybe on the go or something like, or whatever. But we said it should be kind of the iTunes of the mobility sector, so like an open platform for the sharing economy. People could actually come up with different business solutions based on this mobility concept. Has to be designed, of course. The guys from Audi made it look quite beautiful, maybe, or not. You have to decide for yourself. And then this would be like just a video now, showing how the experience, how it would go now to take yourself home with this kind of home button, basically. It's now literally available. So you would order this flywheel. You would summon in, basically. It comes, picks you up, and then you would ride home smoothly, silent, electric, right? Silent. I mean, the noise of the city. Imagine, think about how noisy and annoying they can be, and how beautiful it is electric. So then dive into the tunnels. Now we turn into the kind of transfer route mode, and we can actually use the electricity down there to charge on the go, which is there already. So then we couple with other people who apparently have the same destination like us. So because now we share the same destination, it's actually the chance to meet our neighbor on the way home is much higher. Sorry. You have to have it, or you have to like it or not. But I think we have to force people to talk more again. Like we have to enable communication rather than disabling it. But I mean, so this would be kind of a illustration: sushi subway, right? And these people now. So they seem to have a different direction. They want to go somewhere else now. So okay, bye-bye. They take off. Oh no, we arrived. Yes, we arrived now to our kind of destination neighborhood, and turn back into the local mode. And we together with our neighbor. Right now it's two flywheels together. And this is really bad resolution, but okay. This is now the kind of this mobility landscape that can also grow into the third dimension at the top. So the idea this was a Berlin street before, just as a reminder. This is how we look in the future, of course. But the idea really is to say, can we multiply public space through these mobility concepts? This is maybe the biggest unit, this flywheel, but with the e-bike, walking, can we start to layer public space, three-dimensionally? And so this is now the last mile. We've taken the route home. So, and because these mobility concepts, they're shared and they are autonomous, so they don't have to be parked anywhere, because they're silent, because they're small, and because they are CO2 neutral. We can actually now really renegotiate these spaces for mobility and e-mobility, and really design neighborhoods focused on people and not on these machines. So we arrive at home, we say goodbye to our next door neighbor. Bye-bye. Hope it was a fun ride. So, but when we go to sleep, and rest, I mean, these kind of, think of them as robots. They can do other jobs for us during we sleeping. They could actually, deliver parcels around the city during night. And this is how I hope in the future we will at some point have these kind of mobility concepts that are seamless, three-dimensionally, and on demand, basically. So I want to now, explain a little bit how we think that these mobility concepts will translate into the urban environment, and we call this the urban shelf. And this is, as we think of urban environments right now, the streets on the bottom, and then the privatized space into the z-axis. And we actually want to think of this as an inverted concept. So from before we start duplicating, multiplying privatized space, we want to now first start with the multiplication of public space. And actually, instead of like, designing kind of objects, we want to design basically wholes. So from, these plates could be designed through the movement of people, the flow of people, through the flow of air, and through the flow of light. This kind of, how this urban shelf, these layers could be then designed basically. And, the basic elements would be structure to hold it up, of course, the platforms, the floors and the ceilings, the circulation for whatever mobility concept would be, and then, of course, the built-in units for housing and for commercial purposes and so on. Somebody recognizes this? I think it's, for me it was very, important moment yesterday actually to go and visit. And I think we did this sketch as a little provocation for you guys, because I think, look, don't be mad at us, yeah? But, think of it as, as a structural, spatial, condition, not as a shopping center or community shopping center, but it could also be for living, could be, maybe. We discussed about this yesterday. There's a proof. Amata's sitting right there. We discussed about how big could this be scaled up? What if we include living there and not just, commercial units and functions? And could this be, we think of this more as, neighborhood scale, not just the building scale, but how big should it become actually? How big could we scale it up? Facebook average 383 people was a neighborhood maybe design. The 4 blocks in Barcelona are around 5,000 people. So I don't know, somewhere between 500 and 2,000 people maybe as a neighborhood design, as a size. And I think that's for us a really important slide to say, on one hand we have architecture design that thinks about buildings, and that is driven by private interests, an investor, a client, and so on. And on the other side, we have urban design, which is really driven by the public kind of sphere, and it's about negotiation of different kind of needs and desires. But I think we really have to think about the scale in between architecture and urban design. I think neighborhood is like really, we should teach that at school. I think that's really an important scale that we have to focus more on, about like, neighborhood, because it highlights the aspect of the community, because the urban design is simply too big to scope with that, and architecture is too small to realize that. So I think we need that third kind of scale in between, and that's, we say it could be driven by these mobility concepts. Doesn't have to be, but I think that's as a starting point. That's how we see it. This is one example of this neighborhood, more maybe stacked on top of each other. The structural system of a building, so far the elevator core helps to hold the structure up. We say split it, so we actually can use floor plates that are mostly carrying themselves. They're so heavy to carry themselves, but now they actually can help span in between those cores. They're part of the structural system. It works. We proved. No, but the idea really is minimal footprint of these structures, maximum kind of space on the top, and this is how this kind of neighborhood could be look like. So instead of putting a facade, it's not a tower. This is more like 3-dimensional neighborhoods, little units inside, and you can actually have these local connections. Of course, this is very high, so you would need some kind of elevator, but you have, of course, the local connection in between. And then also this is more like master planning on a floor plan, not designing the floor plan like here's the kitchen, here's the entrance, but to say like, this is units that actually can have a zoning we describe, and that can actually, these units can also grow maybe. As families grow, these units could grow, not static thinking of flats, but think of rooms that need to be added to. Yeah, this is how it could look like. And then, these streets, yeah, right? Streets, I mean, Hong Kong. There's actually, the last space that's left in Hong Kong is street space. So why do we drive in the sun with cars? Let's put some urban shelf on top of it. This would how it looked like. And again, the idea of a community, public space, people meet. I learned in the comments that 50% is circulation space, and why can we scale this up? Like, let's give space to circulation. That's important. Let's make people meet each other. That's the Berlin version, less fancy, a little bit more affordable maybe. But I think that's also important to say. Different incomes could be individually kind of located into those structures as well. So it doesn't have to be only affordable maybe, but also you could have your villa on the roof, which is very kind of fancy. So really an integrated kind of neighborhood concept. And then have these shared spaces maybe also to open up different parts of the flat to temporarily kind of share it out with when your mobile phone becomes a key to a door, you can actually give temporary access to functions you don't need at home, or also not just living, but really production. Think about 3D printing. Why do we need industrial areas? We can really bring those production cycles more together and closer together now. And then we did, if you think about the living unit inside of those structures, that's a very extreme for one person mini apartment. Mini, yes. We worked on with a South German car manufacturer on that. I'm not allowed to tell the name, but the idea was to say let's shrink it down to maybe 30 square meters per person or 2 person, and have more kind of a public shared area and a more private zone to the back. But then maybe open it up to say, how could this unit talk to our neighbors? And this idea of a foldable structure that could open up and combine functional kind of moments with your neighbors temporarily as well. And another site, you could say, for these mini apartments could be street spaces. In Berlin, we calculated that we have around 5.7 million of potential space in the city. That equals to almost 200,000 people who could live in this area. So if we think about densification of our cities, like the cities which are there already, so activating that parking space, once we don't need to park anymore because we ride shared and autonomous, then we can turn those sites, a very extreme site condition, but to say design around them kind of living units that could be also connected to each other, could grow, and to say this is the idea of a kind of a new neighborhood that starts to grow within an old neighborhood. Also have a community kitchen maybe on the ground floor, and then living on top as well. But then it's the sides are maybe more closed, and it's open up more to the length of the street, so it also gives you privacy and the idea of light. So really designed around those streetscapes basically. And so this really tries to sum up basically what we want to achieve, interconnected neighborhoods. So again, not just architecture, not urban design in the other extreme, but really have this kind of neighborhoods that are then interconnected, subways and so on. Flying buses, somebody wants to talk about flying buses with us now. But then so we have the chance and to take these ideas and concepts and go to talk to other people. We had the chance to work with students in Brazil on this urban shelf idea at a conference in Rio, and then we went to the Morro de Providencia. And now it becomes a bit, now that was maybe more kind of very kind of utopian, and now we try to really bring it down to reality. As I said in the beginning, now it tries to become more realistically. And learning from Rio, that was an interesting kind of time we had there to say this shelf is actually an interesting concept to combine top-down strategies with a bottom-up kind of movement. So people could, as in a favela, build their own structures, 1 story, 2 stories maybe, but into that shelf. So it's kind of an organized, like cleaned up favela condition almost. And that was the idea really about participation. So people, you know, if you integrate them in the planning, in the construction of the neighborhood, they identify with that space. And I think that's also something we should, you know, in the highly industrialized, you know, building process, we should not forget, like, how can we actually use low tech to activate people's participation? And then, of course, this strategy, and as we in Germany had 2015 so many Syrian refugees coming, there was a big discussion starting about housing. How do we want to? We have a housing crisis already in Germany, and this almost 1 million refugees from Syria just, you know, added to that basically. And it was actually for the architectural community a very kind of a interesting moment, because there was discussion coming up again about like affordable but high quality housing. And so we also try to participate in that with the idea of this urban shelf and the low-tech construction. And we talked to people who did reconstruction in Syria, and they told us basically we don't have anything but clay. That's the only, you know, material they basically have. If I go back, you know, these structures are, most of these buildings, or some of them buildings, are structurally still intact, but the facade was kind of falling in from the detonation wave, but the structure is still intact. So it's about really facade construction. So this is actually, we could argue that that's a shelf as well. People have to finish the kind of the facade, and that's what we're now implementing in south of Germany, and starting construction this summer. And I'm really happy that we get to this moment now that we say this Tübingen urban shelf. Basically, on the very left, you see the basic framework, the flooring, much smaller scale as I promised in the beginning, but the circulation is part of its structure, infrastructure. And then, with the help of refugees, we want to, you know, install the facade with rammed earth stones, these clay material, and they are actually quite easy to produce. That was important to say, like, it's really do-it-yourself construction method, but still doesn't look like, you know, it has an aesthetic kind of, you know, kind of importance of this rammed earth walls, which are extremely beautiful if it's a whole wall basically. And with these stones, they're almost 50 centimeter long, we actually can kind of, you know, come closer to this kind of aesthetic basically. So this shows the process, the shelf structure, then the fitting out of the exterior facade with clay, and then this is how it will look now at the end. We start building this now with a local, you know, housing development or company, basically Kreisbau Tübingen. And again, mobility, even if it's just, you know, walking, but it's like, it's still a design driver. Like, you know, fire regulations made us even add more stairs, which I think at the end works out quite well. It's quite nice to have, like, you know, this kind of, you know, like a landscape of stairs cases basically. So this is like an intermix. We start with refugees, we have student apartments on the top, we have a roof garden for the neighborhood, like a workshop at the ground floor, and more refugees. And then these units, so again, like the ideas that we had from the urban shelf, like, you know, from private to public, do we say we live through? These units are actually, you know, we have a north orientation and a south orientation. So you sleep to the silent north, and then you have this bathroom as a kind of natural kind of blocker between the more private functions and the more public functions towards the balcony access to the south. And then this balcony access is now not this kind of hallway that runs through, but it has these pockets always to, you know, to kind of give also, you know, to identify each unit basically. And then this kind of landscape of staircases. You could take probably a different way home every day, a different path basically. And then of course I think the roofers have to be activated. We need to use them, and we will. So these are the, just quick floor plans showing that like there's highly regulations how much square meters exactly the room has to have and can be and so on, because it will be turned into affordable housing after we have it for refugees. And this is the student apartments. They look like super narrow, but I think of them as more kind of two-faced kind of apartments, one to the north and one to the south. This is how it looked like. Yeah. And then, really the idea of like, if we this community, the idea of like building together, like it also, people identify with this, with their built environment much stronger, I think. And really like, what we hope, but we don't know for sure, but it would be fantastic if just one of those people actually takes that knowledge back to Syria maybe and really, distributes that thinking over there and like really helps to contribute to the reconstruction of that. And I think that's, so we're working with, we have a Syrian refugee also, who comes by to the office and kind of helps us developing this further and like testifying basically, or like testing if it's possible actually. And I think this, we got really excited about clay somehow. It's such a beautiful material, like it's the oldest, of course, the oldest building material, but it can really contribute to like a circular city metabolism, I think. So from an excavation, from preparation, installation, then recycling, kind of circular kind of metabolism basically. I think if we think of a bigger scale, not just a small house in Tübingen, but that's the Berlin shelf version we want to work on now, like scale this up basically. I think it's it could really contribute to like a sustainable city growth, because we cannot afford to just build with concrete and steel. I think we need different materials, also in the kind of dense urban environment. So basically, to sum up, when we were questioned with the Bahn reconsidering dwelling, so for our approach would be to say, first of all, we need human scale mobility that leads to a kind of healthy densification, mixed neighborhoods that give identification, and this idea of the urban shelf to say it's open for participation and different materials, and it's maybe adaptable to future needs, changeable. I think that's also something very important. And with having this said, I would say thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Max Schwitalla, for such an inspiration talk. Now it's Q&A time. You can either use a small paper and write down the question, or use the microphone in the middle of aisle, or you can ask the microphone from our staff. You even can ask in Thai, and we have translator.
And may I also invite Ratchaporn Chuchoy, the moderator of the sessions, to go up on stage. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It was extremely interesting projection of the future, I have to say. Meanwhile, we're waiting for the questions from the floor. I would like to start.
Please.
Actually, at the very beginning of your lecture, you mentioned the reference from 60. I think many of us fell in love with those very, in a way, utopian, dystopian movement of Archigram, Super Studio, or even the Metabolist. From your presentation, I think it's very, in a way, utopia. And I love that. This is not a negative comment. Could you actually elaborate on this aspect, how you relate yourself to this movement of the 60s, or how you see yourself in relation to that, different standpoints, or taking some inspirations, all that?
Yeah, first of all, the 60s are like heroes, yeah. So
of course.
So we don't want to relate to them. We just we want to be inspired by them. That's how we think. And as I tried to explain with the slide about showing the world population at that time, I think they were far ahead of their time, because I think there was no need to think like they thought at that time, because urban environments were not so didn't have that pressure as we have them today. That's one thing. So there was not the massive need to think like this. And the other thing is there was not the technology that could help to translate these structures, or build these structures, circulate through these structures, and so on. If you think Constant was one of the first ones. He talked about the Homo ludens, who was like this, free floating, somebody who gets paid for having a good time. The Instagram kids today, they are exactly what he was describing, basically. And so I think, for me, the 60s are more relevant, or they actually turn into reality. We just, as architects, maybe.
You mean after 50 years?
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. So I think, the need was not there to think of this, and the technology was not there. So that's why also maybe it just, it happened to be in books, basically, and that was it, basically. Paper architecture, exactly. Yeah.
So it's more like inspiration.
Yes.
Like they were ahead of their moment.
I also think, of course, maybe it turned maybe sometimes too big, but their inspiration, and if we try to, make it a bit more graspable, maybe a bit more kind of controllable, I think they should be built. I think we should start building like that. Support structures, infill, all these concepts that, that were there already. We should really start with them again.
To continue what we discussed last night as an introduction, we have to say that in a way you work as an architect, but on the other hand, it's not. So how do you see yourself on this standpoint?
Well, I was before we started the studio. I was very an architect.
Too architect.
Yeah, no, I'm like working on commercial projects, and and so I thought then at some point, well, how do you contribute to what's happening out there? And as an architect,
what do you mean, how to contribute as an architect?
Yes.
Can you elaborate on this a little bit?
Yes. Yeah. What is it? By is it a beautiful facade with nice shapes? I think it's I got so bored of that, basically, and it's okay, how can we open up our discipline and start to talk to mobility providers, because I realized, well, they are shaping our cities. Audi and BMW is shaping our cities, not architects and urban designers. So that's why I thought we have to start talking to those people, and take responsibility as architects and urban designers, and say, well, approach them, go to them, even of course, if I would knock Schindler's door and they'd be like, what the hell do you want here? Who are you?
As an architect.
As an architect, and I was like, well, I think I want to share some thoughts with you guys, and then they I knocked again and again, so I search for your kind of the collaborators, maybe the ones you hate the most, maybe that's the one you should approach, maybe. Or
so you hate elevator?
No. Not. I don't hate them. It's not at all. They really we talking in Schindler with the kind of the innovation department. They're it's really amazing what they are open for. They think totally beyond the elevator. They think in circulation flows, people flows, and they taught me one thing: make people happy. Don't think about money. Don't think about stuff. Think about make people happy. That's the main goal, basically. So I'm saying this: what you see as a problem, as the elevator and the car is a problem. Try to talk to those and say well, how can we turn it into a solution, basically, or how can we start to modify it, or
But you still see yourself as an architect in this way?
We have been now, let's say, for 4 years. We're doing conceptual work and research, and if you define an architect who is somebody who builds actually stuff, then I can say, well, if I come back in 1 year, hopefully, then I could tell you then, yes, I can show you a picture of something being built. So I totally want to become back an architect in that sense.
The reason I'm asking this question is that because your standpoint is quite interesting, because it's between buildings. You mentioned in the lecture between buildings and urban design. And I would add also technology,
Yeah.
because you discuss a lot of how technology would change our city, our living environment,
Yeah.
and also the way we live. So it's I think you touched a lot of very important issues that sometimes as an architect we take it for granted that we have to bring cars in, we have to have elevators to go up. So that's why I'm asking,
Yeah.
how do you see yourself?
Okay, for example, with the Tübingen project, the last one for the refugees, well, Schindler, we thought, okay, should we put in an elevator? And it's like, please don't. I mean, it's 4 levels.
4 levels, no need.
No need, first of all. But also then, we also have to have a car park because of the regulations. They say, well, you have so many flats, that means you need to have so and so many car parks. And we said, okay, but at least, don't design a car park just for cars. Think of, the floor can be, tiles, not a concrete slab that is never changeable. So let's have it minimal height for cars right now, but have the floor being changeable, and like you can dig it out again and turn it into living maybe later if we don't need the cars anymore. So you can change the car park basically. You cut the walls in, and the iron is like the reinforcement is put like this, so you can actually cut the sides. So we as architects we can contribute to this and say, well, the technology of the future will change our square meters, our built environment, and we have to take it into our planning already today, I think. Yeah.
มีคำถามจาก floor ไหมคะ Is there any question from the floor or questions written in the paper? Yep.
So, one of I think the most influential architects would be, say, Lebbeus Woods, right? Who I would consider very much an architect, but built very, very little. So I think, most of the work that you showed, I think, is a contribution even if nothing ever gets built, right? So I think, even if maybe one person in here steals one of your ideas about urbanism, like that's a huge contribution. So I think, it's a misnomer, I think, or, maybe a chip on our shoulders as architects that we have to build something in order to feel like we contribute.
Yeah.
And if you've got an environment or a context in which you can receive funding to do this research, that's an amazing contribution, an amazing place.
I mean, I think that's. At the beginning there was like friends of mine, like architects, like, so what are you doing now? Is this art? What should this be? Like, didn't. Okay. Well, I think don't take ourselves so serious. Like, and then you do some fun stuff in between, but just and that's why I think, of course, you say like, talk to people, show the images, start the conversation, talk to I think students is the most important to talk to, because I'm old already. I'm 37. I'm gonna. Maybe 1, 2, 3 more projects, but then I'll be dead. The students today, they should, well, if we have that pace, we should speed up. No, but the students today, they're shaping our, we need to talk to them. That's why, pointing out this idea of the neighborhood. Please, look at the neighborhood community design. I think that's important. And then, the funding, that's also an important maybe question. Like, how do you finance stuff like this? Do you look for clients? Do you take in competition? We did one competition since 4 years now, and I don't look for your kind of case that you have in within yourself. I think it should not come from outside. It should be something you have, like something that's bothering you, something that's interesting you, something you get really excited about, and say like, okay, so who do I need to approach to attack this issue? And I think this is something we as architects should become more proactively, and maybe that's the idea of the 60s again, where they really kind of be more kind of socially proactive, and like as art was shaping our society, and I think all this is long gone now. But we as architects really should maybe look for kind of hands-on kind of collaborators that are supporting our case maybe.
Yeah, because I think the collaborators have made those projects, of course, much more relevant
Of
than
course, yeah.
if it was just a bunch of us architects sitting in a room imagining what life should be like. So
Exactly.
the minute you bring in these collaborators, you bring in Otis, you bring in Audi, like all of the project just becomes infinitely better.
You know, for example, Schindler also, they take this stuff and they do dome movies. You fly through that, these places. It's crazy. I mean, it's really immersive. Like we did this show in Hong Kong and so on. So you get access to like a whole different audience, of course, through these people, and this is amazing. Sometimes also it takes forever. I mean, the Audi thing, like, it was 2014, like it's 3 years old. But I was in the US 2 weeks ago and like talking to Volkswagen, and let's see, maybe, if we find the right, environment, we start to do like a little prototype of that flywheel. And so, let's be not as architects, well, this is my kind of, my discipline, don't, it's like, talk to people. Maybe start design a car, or like, why not? But let's make our hands dirty, basically, right? Yeah.
Can I go? And I'll hand it to you. Hi. Your images were incredibly mind-opening. It's great. But the slide that really hit home to me and made me see your work in a different way was what you did with PB Amata Commons. It made it real, because your big ideas were collaged with all these messy elements that made it real for me as a person in Asia and Bangkok. So I think there's, even though I love the original building, it's one of my favorite buildings, Lakpibina. I love the Commons, I go there every week, but seeing your collage made me see how great that building is, because it's an open building, it's a flexible building, and it was flexible for somebody who came halfway across the world and made you see something different.
Yeah.
So that image was really important to me. I'd appreciate it that you came and you did that image for us. It's just a comment.
Scared. I was really scared about this image. Like, we talked with our friends. But I was like, okay, I'm just this German who can, I even had a Buddha in there, like, and we said, like, let's take the Buddha out. It's like, that's not good. No, but really, like, thanks that this is, it wasn't, we not get beaten up for this or something. we like, it's appreciated. That's good to hear. That's cool.
I come from Sri Lanka, which is a developing country. And we have I think your presentation about the future is very, very good, and I have no problem with that. But one of the things we find is that when a villager does his house with mud, it's very cheap. But when you try to do the same thing in an urban city, it is 10 times the price of a normal building, because you have to bring the mud to the city, then cast it in the city, and do that. So though those may be romantic ideas, it may be cheaper to build in normal terms than to use what a villager uses into the city. Do you have any comment on that?
I mean, the fact that it's not, or it's cheaper, or it's more expensive to build in the city, I realize it's first of all more expensive in the Europe context. Labor is so expensive, that's the main issue. So looking at it from this perspective, I think that yes, the first installation cost might be a bit higher, but they're actually representing the real cost, including CO2 kind of emissions later on, long-term recycling costs and so on. So maybe at the beginning it's a bit higher, but I think looking at a long term, basically, I think it pays off, hopefully. But I think most important is there's these studies that we just cannot keep on going building in steel, glass, and concrete the way we do it. We can't just, the resources are not there anymore. We need to have also for the urban environment. And we did even like one collage. It's like the first clay tower in New York. I mean, why not? Why? We have to, in Tübingen, it's even though it's at the edge of the city, we hope to actually use the excavation as well, partly for the clay. It's not given yet, but we hope to produce the mud or the stones partly on site, not everything outside, but on site as well. And yeah, I mean the transportation cost, like the lower or the less the distance is, of course, the cheaper it is. So, but I mean clay is something that's everywhere around the world and mostly for free. And this gives me hope that this could also work in urban environments. Yeah.
Is there any other questions from the floor? Actually, my screen is already red. It means that we are kind of
1
time
minute.
stop. Yeah, we are already over time. But if there is any question, we can stand for one more question. Okay. Just my question, because you emphasize a lot this representation, the image.
Yeah.
As an architect, I believe you think that it's very crucial, because you talk about that particular Photoshop image that you spent like 2 months,
Yeah.
right? Like to doing that.
Yeah.
So, and especially you mentioned many times that it is still a kind of research project, and it could be like it's projecting in the future. Can you elaborate on this issue of representation that you give a lot of energies
Yeah.
into it?
So all of these images are, we produced in-house. So normally you design a building, you go to the render company, you say like, give me 4 images, bring me back. So we producing all of them images in-house. Sergey is a traditional paper architect, he calls himself. He's coming from the Ukraine. He was doing all these images basically. He's a Photoshop artist, right? I mean, that's incredible what he's doing. And yeah, and he's been our first collaborator actually. He's the very first person who worked with me on these stuff. And I mean, images are, yeah, as I said, architecture takes forever. It's so expensive. Let's start to kind of the discussion through images. And of course, also what's interesting about images, like you can misinterpret them, and people see different things in them, and that leads to misunderstandings that might come to a different solution or something. So
Even better.
even better, exactly. Yeah. So I think we should they are a great tool. I mean, we as architects, we spatializing economic, social problems, and because we as humans are spatial, we can relate to them, and we can explain these kind of abstract problems sometimes in a very kind of spatial way. And I think that makes them so we can relate to them so easily.
So that's how you see the importance of images.
Yes.
Okay, so I think if there's no more question, I would like to conclude the session of Max Schwitalla here, and thank you very much for your wonderful talk and projection to our future.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schwitalla and Ajahn Ratchaporn. Now I'd like to ask Ratchaporn to give the token of appreciation to our speakers.โอเคค่ะก็ขอบคุณมากนะคะแล้วก็จะขออนุญาตประชาสัมพันธ์ข่าวสารของสมาคมเป็นภาษาไทยนะคะซึ่งทางสมาคมสถาปนิกสยามจะขอเรียนเชิญสมาชิกและผู้สนใจเข้าร่วมกันนำเสนอบ้านที่ถูกออกแบบให้สอดคล้องกับพัฒนาการและความเปลี่ยนแปลงในช่วงรัชสมัยแห่งการครองราชย์ของในหลวงรัชกาลที่ 9ระหว่างปีพ.ศ. 2489 ถึง 2559 นะคะเพื่อดำเนินการรวบรวมและตีพิมพ์ลงในหนังสือบ้านในรัชสมัยของในหลวงรัชกาลที่ 9 โดยสมาชิกและท่านผู้สนใจสามารถดูข้อมูลเพิ่มเติมได้ที่อาสาเว็บไซต์และอีเมลที่ขึ้นไว้บนจอณขณะนี้นะคะโดยมีขั้นตอนการส่งข้อมูลคือถ่ายรูปบ้านในสมัยรัชกาลที่ 9 จากนั้นสแกน QR code และกรอกข้อมูลและอัปโหลดรูปบ้านของคุณขึ้นบนเว็บไซต์ค่ะ
ค่ะและอีกหนึ่งโครงการนะคะชื่อโครงการ Halodex Architects สำหรับทั้งสถาปนิกและนิสิตนักศึกษาซึ่งเป็นส่วนหนึ่งของโครงการอาสา Dialog นะคะที่จะประกอบไปด้วยหลายกิจกรรมเลยก็ประกอบไปด้วยการจัดนิทรรศการนะคะการอบรมเชิงปฏิบัติการระยะสั้นและการเสวนาเชิงวิชาชีพและวิชาการโดยจะมีสถาปนิกจาก Halodex ผู้ออกแบบสถานทูตออสเตรียมาบรรยายในวันที่14มิถุนายนนี้และจะจัดเวิร์กช็อประหว่างวันที่17มิถุนายนถึง30กรกฎาคมซึ่งผู้สนใจสามารถส่งพอร์ตโฟลิโอได้โดยตรงที่ vienna@halodex.architects.com ที่ขึ้นอยู่บนหน้าจอนะคะหรือจะขอดูรายละเอียดเพิ่มเติมได้ที่อาสาเว็บไซต์ค่ะสำหรับท่านผู้ที่ทำการลงทะเบียนในออนไลน์แล้วช่วยกรุณาแสดง QR code ในเซสชันต่อไปที่เจ้าหน้าที่ด้วยนะคะ
Thank you very much. We will resume at 4 p.m. for our last sessions of the lecture. Thank you.
Thank you.
The bottom, the stops, the levels where he wants to go, and you feel the last one to get out. Could be quite frustrating, quite a long ride, and it's actually quite impressive. I mean, in China, people get now. I mean, they have like when they come too late to work for the third time, they get fired. So you can imagine what's happening, in big, tall skyscrapers. At 9 o'clock in the morning at the lobby. People want to they start running up because they want to get too late. And this is due to, these conditions. So it's a really serious problem as well. And then with Schindler, they are actually the first ones who implemented this idea of a destination control system. So before you get into the cabin, you tell the system where you want to go, and the elevator kind of groups you according to your destination. So everybody gets in. That's of course, very idealistic, but everybody's super happy because it's a kind of it's highly sophisticated algorithms that calculate the shortest ways for everybody, and that's an interesting paradox because you think if you ask everybody in the room, it's like okay, coupled, you actually won't experience going up and down so much anymore. It's like a kind of gravity responsive interior basically, and. This is, as a one-seater, it's basically could become a personal assistant to an aging society right now. And as a two-seater, we could say it turns into a dating app, maybe Tinder on the go or something. Or as a multiple-seater, it could become a guitar concert, maybe on the go or something like, or whatever. But we said it should be kind of the iTunes of the mobility sector, so like an open platform for the sharing economy. People could actually come up with different business solutions based on this mobility concept. Has to be designed, of course. The guys from Audi made it look quite beautiful, maybe or not. You have to decide for yourself. And then this would be like just a video now, showing how the experience, how it would go now to take yourself home with this kind of home button, basically. It's now literally available. So you would order this flywheel. Okay, where do you want to go? If somebody wants to, it get chaos. But through these technologies, and these algorithms, we actually can, increase the system intelligence. We can increase the system efficiency as well. And of course, most importantly, the experience for the user. So this concept on the right, this idea of this destination control, we want to take from a vertical stack in skyscrapers and take this to an organization horizontally laid out as neighborhoods. So think of your destination in a level now as a neighborhood in a city. And then group people accordingly to their same destination they have, and through in the optimum condition in the above ground and underground routes, transfer routes, bring them to their common neighborhood and then distribute them for the last local mile. So, as I said, we want to activate also, three-dimensionally the spaces that are there already. And we did this example for Berlin, subway tunnels we have. And if you think about tunnels, I mean, this really cuts in the door, basically. So it's a really painful moment for them. I think the door should be like an integral part of the system. It should actually be the entire vehicle should be a door, basically. So what we said, let's first of all shrink this vehicle down to a one-seater, and say the whole perimeter becomes a door now, and then have this powertrain that's a decoupled peripheral powertrain, and so loosely bring them together. And so this is the kind of smallest unit of this kind of collective mobility concept. It's called flywheel, basically. As I said, this door is actually the most important part, because now it can couple with other units. So from a one-seater, it could grow into a two-seater and so on in both sides. And the interior is now, yeah, there it is. So you have the most of the space you have now in front of you instead of behind of yourself. And then it can also turn into a logistic mode for transporting goods, because it of course works autonomously. You don't have to drive it. And because this is kind of loosely like the most expensive infrastructure you could think of, and it's most of the time it's empty. Nothing happens there. People, sometimes there's a subway coming through, but most of the time nothing happens there. And Elon Musk came up with this. It's called the Boring Company. Boring, but no. He actually, I think he released this video like 2 weeks ago, saying like we should have more tunnels and bring cars down, into these tunnels and have like multiple levels. I think we have the same gridlock that we experiencing today on one level. We just have the same thing, on the other level. So I'm not so sure about this idea that you put a Tesla down there. I think we have to reinvent this thing that goes down there, basically. And that was what we tried to do with the designers from Audi. And we looked at the functional architecture of a car. Basically, you have the powertrain in the front, you have the cabin for most of the time 4 people, and then you have the door. The designers who worked with us, they say like, door is such a painful moment, because they design this beautiful object and then somebody